Hello, DM Geezer Jim here to continue along our audiobook / read the frickin' manual. We are continuing in Chapter 5 of the 2024 Dungeon Master's Guide. Thank you guys so much for being here as we're kind of working through the book. As is normal with this series, we will spend the first part reading, and then the second part will be a little bit of personal commentary. I think we're going to go ahead and do the campaign premise section on its own and then go from there. This is a little bit of a thicker one, so blah, blah, blah. Good. Thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us. Let's get into the book. Chapter 5, Creating Campaigns. The next section is called Campaign Premise. Everything outlined about the story of an adventure in Chapter 4 is true of a campaign story as well. A campaign is like a series of comics or TV shows where each adventure, like an issue of a comic or a TV episode, tells a self-contained story that contributes to the larger story. Just like with an adventure, a campaign story is not predetermined because the actions of the player characters will influence how the story plays out. Campaign characters. The characters are the focus of every D&D adventure, and their players are your partners in developing their characters' epic journeys. By working with your players to understand what excites them most, you can craft stories they want to see their characters star in. You can also more effectively draw players into adventure plots. See Drawing the Players in Chapter 4. If you understand what motivates both them and their characters. Player input. It's not up to you to create every aspect of a D&D campaign. Players contribute through the characters' actions and by directly sharing what they want to see in a campaign. You can learn about your players' preferences in two ways. Direct input. Ask your players what they want to do in a campaign. Regularly inquire about how they think the campaign is going, what they'd like to experience more of, and what elements they'd like to explore further. After a session concludes and between sessions are great times to ask players for thoughts about the campaign. The next thing is indirect input. The choices a player makes, starting at character creation, can indicate what they want to see in the game. For example, a rogue player likely wants opportunities for subtlety or skullduggery, while a barbarian player likely craves combat. Take note of what encounters players are enthusiastic about, and seek ways to help the player characters shine. Character arcs. Like most protagonists in film and literature, D&D adventurers face challenges and change through the experiences of overcoming them. By incorporating each character's motivations into your adventures and setting higher stakes through gameplay, you'll help characters grow in exciting ways. You can use the DM's character tracker sheets to keep track of key information about each character. See the Getting Players Invested in this chapter for more ideas. Character motivations. For each character, think about what motivates them to adventure. Motivations generally fall into the following categories. Goal. A character's goal is a short-term reason for the character to adventure. At the start of a campaign, this might be a desire for treasure, a thirst for excitement, or some need for a character's backstory. As characters continue to adventure, they'll find different goals to pursue, such as finding a lost relic, honoring an ancestor, avenging a fallen mentor, or defeating a villain. Ambition. A character's ambition is a broad personal aspiration the character hopes to achieve through a lifetime of adventuring. A character might dream of becoming a legendary knight or bringing peace to their homeland. Ambitions might be unrelated to the character's current goals. Quirks and whims. Quirks and whims are a character's preferences, impulses, or other traits. They often emerge during play, such as a character's tendency to one-up a rude innkeeper or their oft-expressed fondness for displacer beast fur. Players often reveal their character's motivations through play. If you're uncertain or a character's motivations seem to have changed, it's okay to ask players for clarification. Families, friends, and foes. A character's origin, species, and background implies some amount of backstory, suggesting the character's family and what the character did before becoming an adventurer. Take notes of specific background characters, friends, foes, family members, and others who might appear in a campaign. Should these background characters become important to the campaign, work with the player to develop them in detail. Revealing a character's lost sibling or childhood rival mid-campaign should be handled carefully to avoid straining credulity. Make sure a player is comfortable with new developments about their characters before introducing them. Character-focused adventures. Adventures should occasionally highlight character motivations or elements of their backstory. Here's a few examples of a character-focused adventure. A rival from a character's past shows up to settle a grudge. A sneaky character puts their skills to the test by leading the rest of the party to conduct a heist. A character learns the location of a magic item needed to save their hometown. A spellcasting character must undertake a trial to join an exclusive group of spellcasters. Any adventure that focuses on a single character should incentivize the whole party to participate, even if just to help their companion. Avoid focusing adventures on one character too often and look for opportunities to have character-focused adventures for each character from time to time. Setting new goals. Characters can change their goals whenever they please, but you can encourage them to do so by giving them significant victories roughly every 5 levels. When your characters accomplish their goals, consider the following questions. How does completing this goal create a new challenge? How is this victory only part of what the characters want to achieve? Who might be upset by the characters completing this goal? What is a reward the characters will be excited to receive that also moves them closer to their ambition? Use these answers to these questions to develop new character goals and to inspire further adventures. The next section says building on the character's actions. Sometimes it can be fun to let the player steer the campaign by having their character's actions dictate future events. For example, if the characters buy a tavern using the treasure they've amassed, you can adjust the campaign so that the tavern has a role in future adventures. One adventure might involve a competitor trying to put the character's tavern out of business. Another might use the tavern as a setting for a murder mystery. DM's character tracker. This is another sheet. It's character tracker, character's name, player's name. What is their motivation for playing, acting, exploring, fighting, instigating, optimizing, problem-solving, socializing, storytelling, notes on player expectations. These are restatements of Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 content when we were discussing, going back to the first part of the book. Character details, class, background, subclass, level, species, alignment, goals and ambition, quirks and whims, magic items, families, friends and foes, and adventure ideas. Okay, and then we get into campaign conflicts as part of the same section. One way to ensure your campaign's longevity is to come up with 3 compelling conflicts you can create adventures around. Introduce these conflicts early in the campaign. As the campaign unfolds, focus adventures on different conflicts to keep the player's excitement high. Use the campaign conflicts tracking sheet to record your campaign's conflicts with rooms to add details or notes. A conflict can be as big or as small as you like, and it's nice to have at least one conflict that can be resolved quickly. Each conflict should involve the adventurers against some antagonistic force, though you can also create conflicts between 2 powerful forces without necessarily knowing which force, if either, the adventurers will align themselves with. The Flavors of Fantasy section below provide examples of conflicts that reinforce particular themes. If a conflict reaches a satisfying end before the end of the campaign, create a new conflict to replace it. You can also replace conflicts that don't resonate with your players, as well as conflicts you're having trouble building ventures around. Conflict arcs. In the same way you think about characters' arcs over the course of a campaign, think about how each conflict might manifest over the course of the campaign. How do the characters first encounter the conflict? How does the conflict develop over time? What might a climatic ending to that conflict look like? One helpful way to structure a conflict arc is to use tiers of play described in Chapter 4. Levels 5, 11, and 17 represent milestones in character power and capabilities, and they can also be story milestones in the arc of your campaign. The shift from one tier to another is an ideal time to wrap up a campaign conflict and introduce a new one that has a broader reach and represents a greater threat. The threshold of a new tier can also be an opportunity for characters to realize the scale of a conflict they've been dealing with. To realize, for example, that the bandits they fought throughout their first 4 levels are merely puppets of an enemy nation they must confront in the second tier. The Greyhawk section in this chapter has examples of conflict arcs, and here's a nice little sheet. Campaign conflicts. Conflict 1, the adventurers versus blank. Conflict 2, adventurers versus blank. Conflict 3, adventurers versus blank. Ooh, big section. Flavors of Fantasy. Your D&D campaign might be inspired by a particular flavor of fantasy, several of which are discussed in the sections that follow. Any of these fantastical subgenres can be informed and inspired by the cultures, myths, legends, and fantasies of any culture. An epic fantasy campaign could draw on French romancers or Chinese wuxia stories. A mythic fantasy campaign could be based on Greek myth or the Epic of Gilgamesh, and so on. Heroic fantasy. Heroic fantasy features adventurers bringing magic to bear against monstrous threats, the default subgenre presented in the core D&D rule book. Heroic fantasy conflicts. Heroic fantasy campaigns often revolve around delving into ancient dungeons in search of treasures or to destroy monsters or villains. Consider conflicts like these to drive the action of a campaign. An evil cult. Wicked cultists infiltrate a peaceful realm to free an ancient evil entity trapped in a dungeon. Releasing the entity would surely spell the realm's dooms. Fungal plague. To protect a primeval forest from the encroachment of hunters and settlers, druids unleash a fungal plague that quickly gets out of hand. Or an old enemy. An elusive villain who plagued the characters years ago resurfaces, giving the characters a chance to finally bring the villain to justice. The next category is sword and sorcery. A sword and sorcery campaign features a grim world of evil spellcasters and decadent cities where the protagonists are often motivated more by greed and self-interest than by altruistic virtue. Sword and sorcery conflicts. In this flavor of campaign, magic users often symbolize the decadence and corruption of civilization, and mages are the classic villains of these settings. Magic items are therefore rare and often dangerous. Consider conflicts like these to drive the campaign. Evil adventurers. An evil band of experienced adventurers wields power and influence to oppress hapless folk. An evil weapon. A knight under the influence of a sentient evil weapon terrorizes a peaceful realm. Cultists worship and protect this weapon, which must be seized and destroyed to end the threat. Or forgotten dynasty. The long-lost seat of a forgotten dynasty rises from the sea or the desert sands, and its people launch a campaign of conquest. The next campaign flavor of fantasy is an epic fantasy. An epic fantasy campaign emphasizes the conflict between good and evil, with the adventurers on the side of good. These heroic characters are driven by a higher purpose than selfish gain or ambition. Characters might struggle with moral quandaries, fighting the evil tendencies within themselves as well as the evil that threatens the world. And the stories of these campaigns often include an element of romance, tragic affairs between star-crossed lovers, passion that transcends even death, and chase or duration between knights and nobles. Epic fantasy conflicts. Conflicts like these highlight the themes of an epic fantasy campaign. An apocalypse. A prophecy predicts the end of the world unless the adventurers intervene. Apocalypse cultists oppose the characters at every turn. Or a dragon tyrant. An evil and powerful dragon moves into the region, upsetting the ecology and demanding tribute from nearby settlements. The foe time forgot. An evil foe believed to be long dead emerges from the Feywild, alive and well after being lost in time. This foe seeks revenge against the descendants of long dead enemies. The next type is mythic fantasy. A mythic fantasy campaign draws on the themes and stories of an ancient myth and legend, from Gilgamesh to Cuchulainn. Adventurers attempt mighty feats of legend, aided or hindered by the gods or their agents, and the characters might have divine ancestry themselves. The monsters and villains they face might have a similar origin. The chimera in the dungeon isn't just a random beast, but the product of a divine curse. Mythic fantasy conflicts. Conflicts like these highlight the themes of a mystic fantasy campaign. Divine trials. Seeking a gift or favor from the gods, the adventurers undertake a series of trials that lead them to the realms of the gods, where the adventurers can plead their cases. Divine wrath. After a temple is sacked, a vengeful god sends an escalating series of woes upon a kingdom until the temple's relics are returned. Giants. An enormous castle on a cloud settles over the land. The characters can battle the giants living there or try to broker a lasting peace. The next one is supernatural horror. If you want to put a horror spin on your campaign, the monster manual is full of creatures that suit a storyline of supernatural horror. An essential element of such a campaign is an atmosphere of dread created through careful pacing and evocative descriptions. Your players contribute too. They must be willing to embrace the mood. Whether you want to run a full-fledged horror campaign or a single creepy adventure, discuss your plans with the players ahead of time. Horror can be intense and personal, and not everyone is comfortable with such a game. The advice on discussing limits under ensuring fun for all in Chapter 1 is particularly important for a horror game. Supernatural horror conflicts. A supernatural horror campaign often features undead or demonic foes whose evil transcends the merely mortal. Consider conflicts like these to drive the campaign. The Faceless Lord. Ch5, the Faceless Lord, oozes out of the abyss and into the Underdark. The characters hear from subterranean folks who need help defeating the Demon Lord and its minions. School of Necromancy. Vampires open a college of necromancy, attracting evil necromancers who need fresh corpses for their studies. An order of vampire hunters seeks the character's help, or an undying monarch. A venerable monarch clings to power by worshipping Orcus and then becoming a lich. Intrigue. Political intrigue, espionage, sabotage, and similar cloak and dagger activities can provide the basis for an exciting campaign. In this kind of game, the characters might care more about skill proficiencies and making friends in high places than about attack spells and magic weapons. Social interaction takes on greater importance than combat. Make sure your players know ahead of time that you want to run this kind of campaign. Otherwise, a player might create a combat-focused character only to feel out of place among diplomats and spies. Intrigue conflicts. Conflicts like these are ripe for an intrigue campaign. Feuding fiefs. Two fiefs or settlements have been feuding for years. The characters are drawn into the ongoing feud after helping one side. Royal rivals. The sudden death of a sovereign plunges a kingdom into chaos where the rightful heir is challenged and threatened by rivals or a scheming advisor. After a monarch takes an interest in the characters, they become the targets of the monarch's most trusted advisor, who is scheming to become the true power in the realm. The next one is mystery. A mystery-themed campaign puts the characters in the role of investigators, perhaps traveling from town to town to crack tough cases that local authorities can't handle. Such a campaign emphasizes puzzles and problem-solving in addition to combat prowess. An adventure composed of nothing but puzzles can become frustrating, so be sure to mix up the kinds of encounters you present. Mystery conflicts. A mystery might set the stage for the whole campaign. The characters might uncover clues to this mystery from time to time, while individual adventures might be only tangentially related to it. Consider conflicts like these for a mystery campaign. A criminal syndicate. A many-headed criminal syndicate seeks economic and political power. The syndicate has spies everywhere, including among the adventurers' families or friends. Shape-shifting assassins. A secret association of doppelgangers or other shapeshifters slowly assassinates prominent figures one by one. To catch a thief. An extraordinary thief steals only the most valuable jewelry and works of art. The characters might become a target of the thief when they acquire a priceless treasure. The next type of adventure, flavor of fantasy, is swashbuckling. The swashbuckling adventures of pirates and musketeers makes for a dynamic campaign which dashing, charming heroes weave their way through palace intrigues and leap from balconies onto waiting horses to escape dogged pursuers. In a swashbuckling campaign, the characters typically spend a lot of time in cities and royal courts and aboard seafaring vessels. Nevertheless, the heroes might end up in classic dungeon situations such as escaping from a prison cell block or searching storm sewers to find a villain's hidden chambers. Swashbuckling conflicts. Conflicts like these highlight the themes of a swashbuckling campaign. Inherited antagonists. A character inherits a magic item from a deceased relative, unaware that this relative's enemies are after the item. Pirates and privateers. A new monarch cracks down on piracy by commissioning privateers and naval officers to hunt pirate ships. The waking deep. A monstrous horror slumbering in the depths of the ocean stirs, driving minions such as sawagwins, meros, or dragon turtles to attack seafaring vessels. Our next flavor of fantasy is the war. A campaign focused on warfare centers on heroes whose actions turn the tide of battle. The characters carry out specific missions. They capture a magical standard that empowers undead armies. They gather reinforcements to break a siege or cut through the enemy's flanks to reach a demonic commander. The party might also support the larger army by holding a strategic location until reinforcements arrive, killing enemy scouts, or cutting off supply lines. Information gathering and diplomatic missions can supplement combat-oriented adventures. So, war conflicts. Conflicts like these highlight the themes and flavor of a war campaign. freedom fighters. Poorly armed and disorganized subjects of a tyrant revolt, or invaders. A militaristic nation invades its benevolent neighbors. Pawns in a game. A war rages on for decades, its original cause all but forgotten. The people caught up in it strive to find meaning and purpose in a bleak and violent world. Our next set is Crossing the Streams. Deep in D&D's roots are elements of science fiction and science fantasy, as well as a wide-ranging collection of fantasy inspiration, and your campaign might draw on those sources as well. You can send your characters hurtling through a magic mirror to Lewis Carroll's Wonderland, put them aboard a ship traveling between the stars, or set your campaign in a far future world where laser weapons and wands of magic missiles exist side by side. See Firearms and Explosives in Chapter 3. Crossing the Streams conflicts. Conflicts like these create opportunities for crossing the streams. Beyond the magic mirror, a mysterious mirror in a strange dungeon is a portal to a different world where whimsical tales unfold, or perhaps some version of the modern world, already in existence, Gamma World. The characters inhabit a post-apocalyptic wasteland that is largely medieval in feel, but isolated outposts still hold futuristic technology from before the cataclysm. Invaders from Wild Space. Spaceships land on the character's world and disgorge hostile creatures armed with advanced technology. The next section is the campaign setting. Just like an adventurous setting as described in Chapter 4, a campaign setting is an essential part of a campaign's premise, shaping the kind of stories that unfold there. As the DM, you have two options when choosing a campaign setting. Use a published campaign setting or create your own campaign setting. Whether you create your own campaign setting or use a published one, the world of your game is always your own. You can customize it to suit your tastes and those of your players. Using a published setting. One advantage of using a published campaign setting is that much of the world building is done for you. However, this means your players might know as much about the setting as you do. You can get around this by changing key aspects of the setting to better serve your needs, which has the added benefit of challenging your players' expectations. The D&D settings table describes several established campaign settings. Not all, but several, and most of them are here. The setting is Dark Sun. Heroes make their mark on a post-apocalyptic world defiled by magic and forsaken by the gods. Dragonlance. The forces of good battle the evil Queen of Dragons and her armies in the world-shaking War of the Lance. The next setting is Eberron. In the aftermath of a deadly war, magically advanced nations rebuild as a Cold War threatens lasting peace. Exandria. Heroes make names for themselves in a world made popular by the streaming show Critical Role. Forgotten Realms. Larger-than-life heroes and villains struggle to determine the fate of the world as they explore the ruins and dungeons of fallen kingdoms and long-forgotten empires. Greyhawk. As tensions rise among warring nations, heroes plunder dungeons to gain the magic and might they need to defeat the growing forces of evil. Planescape. Sigil, the City of Doors, is where the heroes begin to explore the wonders of the D&D multiverse and its many planes of existence. Ravenloft. Heroes are drawn into the gloomy domains of dread, cursed realms ruled by evil lords, and must find the means of escape. Ravnica. In a world-spanning city, 10 disparate factions draw heroes into a web of adventure and danger. Spelljammer. Travel amongst the stars on a spelljamming ship and visit worlds floating in the majestic oceans of the wild space. Strixhaven. Strixhaven, a school of magic, serves as a hub of learning and adventure. And Theros. Heroic destinies wait to be fulfilled in this setting inspired by the myths of ancient Greece. There is an asterisk that says this setting is based on a Magic the Gathering world. And that would cover Ravnica, Strixhaven, and Theros. Okay, just reading what's there. Or creating your own setting. One advantage of creating your own world is it can be whatever you want it to be. Your players will never know more about the world than you do, which can both be a comfort to you and a source of wonder to your players. Moreover, you don't need to memorize any source material about the campaign setting other than what you create for yourself. Whether you create a setting from scratch or borrow elements from the established settings, the result need to resonate with your players. As you create your world, ask your players what settings and genres they enjoy, then use those sources for inspiration to create compelling locations, memorable inhabitants, exciting conflicts, and an internal logic that will resonate with your players. 5 questions to consider. As you contemplate a new campaign setting, think about your answers for the following questions. What's your campaign setting called? Choose an evocative name for your setting. It can be a word or phrase that reflects the theme and tone of the game, or just a made-up name that sounds cool to you. Keep a running list of ideas as you decide on other aspects of your setting. What factions and organizations are prominent? Nations, temples, guilds, orders, secret societies, and colleges shape the social fabric of a setting. What organizations or societal groups play an important part in your setting? Which ones might be involved in the lives of player characters as patrons, allies, or enemies? What organizations can characters join, becoming part of something larger than themselves? The next question is, how common is magic? Spellcasters in magic item shops might be common, rare, or practically non-existent in your world. How readily available are spells such as Lesser Restoration, Raise Dead, and Teleportation Circle? Is magic so widespread it's part of daily life, or so rare that it conjures all sorts of superstitions? What mysteries does the world hold? Every campaign setting has mysteries. A fabled land across the sea, a grim forest hiding a temporal secret. Restless spirits haunting a ruined keep for reasons unknown, an ancient dungeon built for a forgotten purpose, and so on. Dream up as many mysteries as you wish. You never know which ones will seize your players' imaginations and become central to the campaign, and record them in your journal. What role, if any, do the gods play? What greater gods, lesser gods, and quasi-deities are present or worshipped in your world? If there are gods, how involved are they in the world? Are they distant, detached beings, or do they appear before their worshippers and meddle in mortal affairs? That is the end of Chapter 5, Campaign Premise, the read-through section. The next part is going to be comments. As normal, if you're just here for audiobook, thank you for your time. Go ahead and push that stop button now and move on to the next video. I do have some commentary on this. Apologies for the length. I didn't write the section, but there is a lot to talk about here. So let's get into it. A lot of what we went in Chapter 4, Designing Adventures, applies to Chapter 5. The same basic ideas. What is the situation? So in the idea of an adventure, the situation is, what are we doing for this session? The situation for a campaign is, what are all of these adventurers trying to resolve? What is the situation that's threatening the world or threatening the city or threatening the players? What is the big picture situation? What is the big storyline? Same as Chapter 4. The next thing, instead of building adventures, encounters that make up adventures to take care of our one-off situation, now we need to look at using our adventures, what we learn in building adventures, to support a longer standing story. Okay? The tools that we used in Chapter 4 are applying here as well. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you didn't listen to Chapter 4, go listen to Chapter 4, go read Chapter 4, then come back. Kidding. Player input. Whether you ask your players directly or you watch their reaction, player input will have an impact on your campaign design. You're not going to want to waste a bunch of time and effort and resources designing a campaign or a story arc that your players don't care about. They're going to get bored and frustrated. You're going to get bored and frustrated. Either ask them directly or watch what they do. You're keeping track of the sessions. What do they enjoy the most? And then start building your adventure and your campaign themes based on the stuff that they're engaging in. You don't want them to have to save the world if they don't give a crap about the world. If your group's a bunch of anarchists, you don't want the main story of your campaign being, we need to save this king and ensure he stays on the throne. So whether it's directly asking your players what they're interested in or whether it's observing what they enjoy while they play, your players will have a direct input on the design of your campaign. Character arcs. This is where we're tying the character stories to the worlds. Figure out ways to take their backstories and their interest and tie them to the overarching story of the world. Player involvement is a big thing. Some terms here: goals, ambition, quirks and whims. Short-term goals, long-term goals. Quirks and whims are what they are demonstrating through their gameplay. You don't necessarily need to ask this, but you need to pay attention to this. Families, friends, and foes came with their backstories. I do like a couple things that we're talking about here. When you have the character-focused adventures, family, friends, and foes. If the adventurer if your ranger left the wild to come to society because some group kidnapped his sister, and you give that character back the rescue of his sister, you need to pay attention to when you did it, because there's a chance that that character's entire reason for adventuring has been resolved. Why do they continue forward? Why would they take their endangered sister on further adventures if their whole reason for being was to rescue their sister? So while it is a great idea to tie in threads from the player's story and certainly want to resolve some of the bigger things, be cautious about when you do them. Okay? Be cautious about when you resolve the character's overall ambition. Okay? Goals are short-term, ambitions are long-term. Because there's still got to be a reason for them to continue adventuring, right? Setting new goals is a good thing. Building on the character's actions. When your characters act to change the world, they should see the repercussions of that, good and bad. And that should help build your story going forward as well. Real quick, the DM's tracker sheet. It's just a tool. It's just a tool. I know a lot of the old DMs are like, man, that sheet sucks. There's not enough of this or there's too much of that. It's a starting point. It's a visualization of the concepts that are being talked about in the book. If you don't like the form, don't use the form. But use something. Google Docs, spreadsheet, index cards, spiral notebooks, World Anvil, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that you as a Dungeon Master are finding something to organize your thoughts and organize information about your campaigns and your settings. If you don't like the form, don't use the form. But the idea is still good. Campaign conflicts. Why are we in fights? What's going on? These are the stories that drive your world. The reference that was given towards the tail end of it was talking about the World of Greyhawk, the 3 major campaign story arcs there. The Rise of Ayaz, the Rise of the Temple of Elemental Evil, and the Great Kingdom of Aardi are the only 3 that they really talk about. They ignored the Giants, they ignored the Slayers, they ignored several. It doesn't matter. I'm sorry, I was going on a tirade there. But there are 3 major campaign threats, 3 major conflict arcs that are going on in that setting. The idea being, if your players don't like one of them or they fail out on one of them, there's still 2 other things to resolve. But also the idea being, while they're working on one of these arcs, the other one goes to a resolution they may not like. That's giving you a living world. So my advice is, when you come up with these arcs, make sure you know how they're going to resolve with and without player involvement. A living world is an immersive world. If your players knew that there's 3 major dangers going on, major danger number 1 we're going to deal with, and you never tell what happens with major danger number 2 or 3, that's bad world building. That's bad campaign driving. Your players understand the consequences of them choosing to go left is that middle and right don't get dealt with or end up failing. And it's not because they failed, they can't be everywhere at once. So this is world building. When you come up with conflict arcs, make sure you know how they're going to resolve without the player's interaction. And that way your players can see, and you can see, a meaningful change to the world as they go. The flavors of fantasy. This is just a quick section discussing and describing the different ideas behind your adventure designs. Some of you may not agree with all of these terms. Some of these categories overlap. It's okay. It's just ideas to kind of to frame your adventure ideas in terms. A lot of words here. You're going to find most of your campaigns and most of your adventures cross over between a couple of these type things, okay? Don't feel like, oh my God, my adventure sucks because it's half sword and sorcery and half heroic fantasy. It's okay. You're allowed to do that. These are just categories giving you ideas of what style adventure. Basically, I'm telling my group, we're going to run a mythic fantasy because we're doing the Odyssey. We're going to fight the Iliad out, and then we're going to do the Odyssey on the way back. So we're doing a mythic fantasy instead. That's the idea here. Not to necessarily force you into a shoebox, force you into a box, but more give you descriptive terms that you can relate to your players. I promise you, as you get more experience, you're going to be jumping between all of these categories all the time. And then the last thing that we're going to talk about in my little bit of commentary here is campaign settings. Big list of published settings. They left out a couple of them, but that's okay, man. Everyone going to feel their own way about a campaign setting. My only suggestion, though, is when you are a new DM, use a published setting so you can focus on mechanics. So you can focus on how to string everything together, how to run the game, how to manage the game, how to keep the game of pace going. as well as how to tie your players' backstories into a living, breathing world, and how to run your campaign situations through to fruition as conflicts. Trying to build a world to do all of that and learn how to run the game and learn how to tie your players' stories into that world and to learn how the long-reaching consequences and it's a lot to ask of a DM. Do yourself a favor, absorb some information about one of the published settings and start there for your first few games so you can focus on managing the table, so you can focus on playing the game. Because when you get into the homebrew stuff, they have 5 questions that you need to answer. And the one thing that's important about this statement is an internal logic that will resonate with your players. Your homebrew world, your homebrew setting has to make sense to your players if you expect them to engage in it. If you're doing the Halo Ring world, you need to be able to describe why it's that way, what happens this side, what happens on the flip side, all of that. Because you need the world to engage your players and resonate with them. They need to be able to be part of this world that you're designing. If you don't know how to run a game, you don't know how to tell the story of your world in mechanics, in gameplay ways that your players can engage with. Remember, the only way your players get to engage in a setting or in a story is through their player characters and through their dice rolls and through their role play. That's it. If you can't allow your players to engage in your world, they're already by default broken. They can't have as much fun. And then you're not going to have as much fun. So please, 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 I'm not going to say you should or shouldn't. I'm going to say that you should start with a published setting so you can practice mechanics, so you can practice the terms without the pressure of trying to answer these 5 questions and build an engaging world for your players on day 1. That's day 10, that's day 20, that's day 100. And you can and you will eventually do a world build. Every single DM goes through it. But try not to do that day 1. Don't do that until you're comfortable running games so you know how to make your world matter to your players. But that's all I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave off on this section with those last little comments. Very useful section. A lot of terms, a lot of ideas going back and forth. I do like the 5 questions. I actually have 10 questions that I ask world builders, but this is a great starting point. The whole point being, if you can't answer these questions to yourself, there's no way that your players can engage in this world. You got to have at least these 5 points understood, maybe not fully developed, but you need to be able to describe these things to your players if you want your players to buy into your world. They can't buy into your world, they disengage while playing, and it all falls flat. But hey, thank you so much for hanging out, man. This was a little bit longer of a video, big chapter, a few comments about it. I appreciate your time. Likes, follows, subscribes are cool. Join us over on Twitch. We're having daily chats, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. U.S. Central Standard Time, Tuesdays through Saturdays. Jump on in the conversation over there. But above all else, thank you for your time, and hopefully you'll join us for a new episode coming up soon. Be safe.